He won't even notice if I fake it again tonight. That was the very first sentence. No greeting. No context. Just those words, sharp, effortless, brutal, playing out loud from her phone, sitting 3 inches from my elbow. It was 6:37 p.m. I remember the time because I was stirring the pasta sauce and trying to guess whether she'd want Parmesan or goat cheese tonight, even though she never says until after I've already grated the wrong one. And then her phone lit up. The voice memo began automatically, some glitchy setting that never really mattered until right now. I wasn't eavesdropping. I didn't even move. The phone just played. He won't even notice if I fake it again tonight. Last week he actually kissed my forehead afterward, like it was some magical moment. I almost laughed out loud. But Marcia, it gets worse. I don't remember dropping the spoon, but I remember the sound. The sharp metal clink against the ceramic pot. And then the smell, tomato and garlic burning against the bottom as everything inside me went quiet. I turned to look at the phone. Her screen still glowed with the voice message interface. She had sent it just moments ago. To her sister. She was in the bathroom, probably applying that lotion she swears locks in the collagen. I always thought it smelled like vanilla and formaldehyde. And now, all I could think about was how many nights she'd been faking and laughing about it afterward. The message kept going. I know. He's sweet and loyal and all those other beige words. But Marcia, you weren't there last weekend. You didn't see how he panicked when I said I might need space. He looked like a kicked puppy. It was embarrassing. Embarrassing. That's what I am now? I didn't even breathe. I just stared at the screen like it might apologize. Like the phone might correct itself, glitch, rewind, reveal this was some prank. Some AI-generated nonsense. Something other than what it clearly was. Her voice. The same voice that once whispered, I can't believe I found you, in the dark, was now dissecting me for sport. And not even in secret. Just casually. To her sister. As if I were a project she got stuck with. Then came the part one still haven't recovered from. He still doesn't know about Oregon. And honestly, I don't feel bad. That trip reminded me what it feels like to be wanted by someone with a spine. I swear, I almost canceled the wedding when I came back. There it was. A timeline I hadn't questioned, now tainted. That solo cabin reset weekend she insisted she needed? That was Oregon. That was when I stayed up all night worrying she'd been eaten by a bear or worse, spiraling into guilt for asking if she really had to go. That was the weekend I cleaned the apartment, baked her a stupid banana bread from scratch, and wrote her a handwritten note saying, take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. She had been with someone else. She almost canceled the wedding. But I'm the one who's embarrassing? The bathroom door creaked open. I could hear the sound of her slippers. Light footsteps. Humming. I hit pause. My hands were shaking. My knees felt hollow. But I held the phone out to her like it was infected. She tilted her head. What's this? I said nothing. Just pressed play again. This time, I watched her face collapse. And all I could whisper was, how long have you been pretending? Her mouth opened, then closed. No words. Just stunned silence. For once, she had no story. I turned off the stove, grabbed my wallet, my phone, and my car keys. And I left the sauce to burn. I didn't drive far. I wish I had some dramatic story where I raced down the interstate at midnight with the rain slicing across the windshield, some haunting song on repeat, and tears pouring down my face. But no. I sat in the parking lot of a 24-hour pharmacy 6 blocks from our apartment. For 3 hours. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just sat there, fingers still gripping the steering wheel like I might drift into traffic if I let go. I stared straight ahead at the glow of the pharmacy's automatic doors, watching strangers walk in and out like their lives weren't crumbling. Like no one had just heard the woman they planned to marry call them spineless and beige. You know what's weird? The first thing that popped into my head wasn't the cheating, or the lies, or even Oregon. It was the stupid banana bread. The one I made from scratch during her reset trip. I'd Googled how to make it moist without overmixing, used extra ripe bananas just like she liked, even carved a little heart into the top with a butter knife before putting it in the oven. She barely touched it. Said she was detoxing carbs. Now I know she was just full. Not from food, from someone else. I should have driven somewhere, anywhere, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I didn't want to go back to the apartment, didn't want to call anyone. What was I even supposed to say? Hey, just heard a memo where my fiancée described me as an emotional houseplant and casually admitted to a mystery affair. No, I sat there, trapped in my own skin, replaying that voice in my head again and again until I felt physically sick. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Cora, Milo, please. Can we talk? I didn't mean any of it like that. Please come back. I stared at it, watched the 3 little dots blink like they were gasping for air. Another message followed. Cora, it was a joke. Marcia knows I get dramatic when I vent. You're not spineless. I was venting. You do matter to me. You do. Then came the call. I didn't answer, but the voicemail came through anyway. I don't remember all of it, but I remember the way her voice shook, whether from guilt or fear, I don't know. Probably both. She said, please don't do this. You always overthink things. I was frustrated, okay? I'm not perfect, Milo. I get overwhelmed. You want everything to be safe and planned and measured all the time, and sometimes I just want to scream and run. But that doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean I want this to end. Except it does. Because love isn't something you confess by accident. And cruelty isn't something you laugh about with your sister and then file under venting. I turned off my phone. The next morning, I went back to the apartment early. Not to talk, just to gather my things. She was still awake when I walked in, sitting on the floor of the living room in one of my old sweaters, hugging her knees like a child waiting to be forgiven. I didn't say a word. I walked straight past her and into the bedroom, grabbed a duffel, and started loading it. She followed me in. Please, Milo, don't leave like this. You're not even going to talk to me. I didn't look at her. There's nothing left to say. That's not fair, she snapped, the softness disappearing like a mask slipping. You think one voice memo cancels everything we've built. I finally turned to face her. No, but one voice memo explains everything I kept ignoring. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came. And in that awful, dense silence, I realized something even worse than betrayal. She wasn't sorry for doing it. She was sorry for getting caught. I zipped the bag, walked out, and didn't turn around. She didn't chase me. That should have hurt the most, but instead, it confirmed everything I needed to know. I didn't know where I was going. I still don't. I just drove until the city started to blur into nothing. Found a cheap roadside motel with buzzing lights and peeling wallpaper and handed over my debit card like it was a resignation letter from the life I used to have. And now, here I am, sitting on a mattress that smells like bleach and dust, trying to figure out who I am without her. The funny part? She always said I wasn't spontaneous enough. Well, surprise. I'm gone. I thought silence would feel like peace. But silence can be cruel. The motel room was the quietest place I'd ever been. Not peaceful quiet. Not like a library or a park at sunrise. This was the kind of quiet that buzzes inside your ears, makes you aware of every breath you take, every creak of the bed frame, every pathetic sigh that escapes your chest when you try to sleep and can't. I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan spinning like a slow countdown. Somewhere in the distance, a vending machine clunked. It was the only sound I could relate to. I checked my phone around 3:12 a.m., not because I wanted to, but because I hated myself for wanting to. 7 missed calls from Coralie. For texts. The last one read, Cora, I told Mom. She wants you to call her. She thinks this is fixable. I still do too. Fixable. Like I had dented a car. Like I had spilled something on her dress. Like I had done something that needed to be cleaned up. I didn't reply. I turned my phone off again. Around 5 a.m., I drove to an empty diner just off the highway. The kind with pink booths, sticky menus, and waitresses who refill your coffee before you ask. I sat by the window and tried to eat a pancake, but it tasted like cardboard. My stomach had that heavy, low ache that food doesn't fix. I stirred the syrup around my plate and realized I'd been doing the same thing with my life for the past 3 years, trying to make something sweet out of something that was already burnt. I was halfway through a second cup of coffee when I heard the bell over the door. I didn't look up, not until someone sat across from me like they belonged there. Hey, said a familiar voice. It was Marcia, her sister, Coralie's sister. I blinked hard, stunned into silence. She looked different than usual. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes, hair in a messy knot like she hadn't slept either. She didn't smile. I figured you'd be here, she said. I remember you mentioned this place once when we were talking about comfort food. I stayed quiet. She looked down, then back up. I'm not here to defend her. I didn't come to convince you to go back. I tilted my head. Then why are you here? She hesitated. Because I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. My hands curled into fists under the table. About Oregon? She flinched. Just slightly. So I was right. That trip wasn't just about solitude. Marcia nodded slowly. I didn't know the whole truth until afterward. She told me not to say anything. Said she'd figured it out, and you two were back on track. But I couldn't look you in the eye after that. So I stopped coming around. I stared at her. What happened in Oregon? She took a breath. She met someone. A guy she used to talk to in college. Ran into him at a retreat. They reconnected. He didn't know she was engaged. Or at least that's what she told him. It was only supposed to be one night, but it turned into a weekend. When she came back, she told me she remembered what it felt like to be desired, and that you didn't make her feel that way anymore. I laughed, but not because it was funny. More like some piece of me had finally snapped. Marcia looked pained. I told her she was selfish, that she didn't deserve you. But she said you were too fragile, that if she told you the truth, you'd crumble. I leaned forward, voice low, and she was right. Marcia shook her head. No, Milo. Crumbling isn't the same as being weak. It means you cared. I didn't respond. She reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. There's more. I didn't know what to do with this before, but you should have it. She recorded things. Voice notes. Journals. She used to talk about you when she didn't think you were listening. My stomach dropped. Why would I want to hear any more? Marcia looked at me with something that resembled guilt, maybe shame. Because sometimes hearing the full truth is the only way to move on. She slid it across the table and stood up. Before leaving, she said one more thing. She didn't hate you, Milo, but she used you. And that might be worse. Then she walked out, leaving me in the booth with a flash drive I wasn't sure I could survive opening. I stared at it for a long time, debating whether I was strong enough to know more. Whether I could stomach the sound of her voice confessing things she never intended for me to hear. I knew one thing, though. Whatever was on that drive, it would change everything. And I wasn't sure if I was ready, or if I'd ever be. The flash drive sat on the motel nightstand like a cursed object. I couldn't stop staring at it. I hadn't even touched it since Marcia dropped it into my hand like it burned her fingers. And maybe it had. Maybe the truth weighs differently when you've carried it too long. Maybe that's why she finally handed it to me, to stop feeling its weight in her own life. I paced the room for nearly 2 hours before I even took the laptop out of my duffel. When I finally did, my palms were sweaty. My body was doing that thing where your heart pounds too hard in your neck, as if it's trying to climb its way out of your throat and stop you. I slid the flash drive in. A folder opened with a generic name, private. Inside, 9 audio files, each labeled by date. The earliest was from 7 months ago, right after she got back from Oregon. I clicked play. Her voice filled the room. Crisp, casual, careless. Journal note. March 12th. He hugged me today when I got back, and I swear I almost burst out laughing. He smelled like cinnamon and dryer sheets. I kept thinking about Ezra's cologne, how it stuck to my skin for 2 days. I kept waiting to feel guilt. I didn't. I paused the audio. Ezra. The name of the guy. It had a face now. A scent. A permanence. I leaned back and covered my eyes. I should have stopped right there. But you know when you're already broken, and you think maybe the worst is behind you, and somehow, you just keep digging? I clicked the next one. March 19th. Milo bought me a necklace today. Said he saw it and thought of me. I faked tears. He looked so proud of himself. I felt like a villain, but not enough to stop. I still message Ezra every other night. Milo's usually asleep by then. There it was again, that laugh in her voice. Like she was reading aloud from a novel she didn't particularly respect. The third recording, worse. April 2nd. I had dinner with Milo's parents tonight. His mom hugged me and said she was so glad he found someone who made him feel safe. Safe. That's what I am now. A padded blanket. A weighted hug. I nodded and smiled and imagined Ezra's hands under the table instead. God, that sounds horrible, doesn't it? But it's true. Milo is easy. Ezra is real. My throat went dry. The screen blurred. I wasn't crying exactly, it was more like something inside me was leaking out, and I couldn't tell if it was grief or humiliation or both tangled together in a way that made breathing feel like swallowing glass. I skipped to the final file. Labeled June 4th. Just days before the memo she sent to her sister. Okay, I don't know what to do. Ezra wants to meet again. Said he's in town for the weekend and wants one night. Just one. I told him I couldn't, that it was risky now. But God, it's tempting. Milo's been planning this dumb engagement photo shoot and I can't fake another set of smiles. I can't keep lying. But I also can't blow up my life for a maybe. Ezra makes me feel alive. Milo makes me feel small. I wish I could combine them. Or disappear. I shut the laptop. Hard. Everything inside me screamed to punch something, scream, throw the flash drive across the room. But all I did was sit there, completely still. Like if I moved, the whole room would collapse around me. I had spent years loving this woman, holding her when she cried, celebrating her wins, taking late trains to pick her up from work, sacrificing vacations, adjusting routines, making her feel like the center of my life. And the entire time, I was nothing more than a soft place for her to land when the adrenaline wore off. A placeholder. A comfort zone. And she still had the nerve to say she didn't hate me. Hate would have made more sense. Hate at least admits you exist. This was worse. I checked my phone. Dozens of unread messages. Her mother. My brother. Even Coralie again, begging me to please, just call. Her last text said, "We can work through this. We owe it to everything we've built." We? There's no we. You don't accidentally record your truth 9 times over a half-year stretch and call it a mistake. You don't lie to someone's face, share a bed with them, and then whisper into a microphone about how pathetic they are. And you don't get to rewrite the story once you're caught. I didn't respond. I didn't delete the files either. I copied them, saved them twice. Not out of spite, but because someday, when I start doubting whether I imagined all of this, I want proof that I didn't. I want to remember that I mattered once, even if only to myself. The sun was starting to rise again. Tomorrow I'd be someone else. Someone who used to be engaged. Someone who used to fold towels and bake banana bread and believe words meant the same thing in someone else's mouth as they did in mine. But not anymore. This is where the real story begins. I couldn't go home. That was the one thing I knew for certain. I'd replayed the last 72 hours in my mind 1,000 times, the voice memo, the audio files, Marcia's face at the diner, and every time I thought about walking back into that apartment, I saw everything that used to be comforting turned into a monument to my own stupidity. The couch where I rubbed her feet while she texted Ezra. The kitchen table where we'd planned our wedding budget while she debated whether to see him one last time. The hallway where I once hung framed pictures of us laughing in the mountains, the kind of laugh you only fake when you already know something the other person doesn't. Instead, I found myself parked outside a storage facility. A gray box of a building that looked as exhausted as I felt. I walked into the office, I sunken, throat raw from a night of no sleep, and told the guy behind the desk that I needed a unit. He barely looked up, didn't ask questions, just slid a form toward me and asked, monthly or weekly? Weekly, I said. Commitment wasn't exactly my strength anymore. That afternoon, I hauled everything I could out of the back of my car, duffel bags, old journals, a blanket that still smelled like the cologne she used to say she loved, though now I wondered if even that was a lie. I set up a kind of nest in the back corner of the storage unit. My laptop on a box. A camping chair. One flickering battery lantern I found in a gas station clearance bin. It was pathetic. It was undignified. But for the first time in days, I felt oddly safe. Because at least in this metal cube, nothing could lie to me. Around 6 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Another text from her. "Cora, you're making this bigger than it is. We were in a rough patch. You weren't really there either. Be honest with yourself." That one hit different. Because there was this tiny, treacherous part of me, the same part that apologized when she forgot anniversaries, that wanted to believe it. That maybe I had withdrawn. Maybe I had missed something. Maybe this was, somehow, still partially my fault. But then I remembered her voice saying, I faked tears, and that part of me shut up again. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I opened my laptop and played the last file one more time. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to hear it again just to confirm I wasn't overreacting. Maybe I was trying to build scar tissue. I listened to her say she felt nothing when I held her. That Ezra made her feel electric. That I was a life jacket and she wanted a storm. Then I did something I hadn't done since this whole mess started. I opened a blank document. And I wrote. It started with just a sentence. Today, I heard my fiancé's real voice for the first time. Then I kept going. I typed everything. The good, the bad, the absurd. The time she kissed my forehead after yelling at me for not vacuuming right. The time I picked out a ring and spent 6 weeks planning the proposal while she needed space to think. The time I canceled a job interview because she said she had a bad feeling about me switching careers. I poured it all out, one keystroke at a time, like I was wringing poison from my fingers. At some point, I looked at the word count. 9,406. It didn't feel like enough. By midnight, I had written a letter addressed to her. Not to send, just to say the things I never had the courage to before. I told her I deserved better than someone who treated loyalty like a liability. I told her that I wasn't a sponge. I was a human being, one who loved too hard and asked for too little. I told her that she didn't get to call what we had real, if it was only real when it was convenient. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but I think my body had finally run out of water. The next morning, a knock on the metal roll-up door of my unit nearly sent me into cardiac arrest. I waited a beat. Knock, knock. Then a voice. A familiar one. "Milo, it's me." It was Marcia. Again. I unlatched the lock, lifted the door halfway. She was standing there holding 2 paper bags and a look of deep discomfort. "I brought you food," she said. "You look like a raccoon in a hoodie." I cracked the faintest smile. "You know, I've been told worse." She stepped inside without waiting for permission and sat down cross-legged on the floor like this was completely normal. She handed me a lukewarm breakfast burrito and a bottle of orange juice. I didn't have the energy to argue. "I told her not to text you again," she said after a long silence. I raised an eyebrow. "She doesn't listen to me much," she added. "Yeah, I noticed." Then she said something I hadn't expected. "She's not sorry, Milo. She's just terrified of being the villain." I chewed slowly. "Then why are you here?" She looked at me, dead serious. "Because you deserve someone to tell you that you're not crazy." I blinked. For a moment, I didn't trust my own response. "Thanks," I finally said. "That means more than I thought it would." We sat there in silence, chewing on food and on pain. Outside, the sky was starting to darken again. Inside, something was slowly beginning to rebuild. Not much, but something. I never thought a breakfast burrito eaten on the floor of a storage unit could taste like some kind of closure. But it did. Not because it was good. It wasn't. But because for once I wasn't eating alone with my shame. Marcia didn't hover, didn't pity me, didn't try to spin the situation into something poetic. She just sat there with her knees tucked up, sipping her drink and letting the silence settle naturally. I hadn't realized until that moment how much I missed human presence that didn't come with an agenda. When she finally spoke again, it wasn't about Coralie. Not directly. "You know she used to do this when we were kids, right?" she said, her voice quieter now. "Play 2 people against each other. Make you feel like you were the only one she trusted, and then later you'd find out she'd told someone else the exact same thing. She never really grew out of it. She just got more careful." I didn't respond at first. I was still trying to swallow the thought that maybe none of what we'd shared was ever real in the way I believed. That maybe I'd been auditioning for a role in someone else's story, and the part had always been written as disposable. "She's scared of being alone," Marcia added. "So she builds these little safety nets everywhere. You were the strongest one." I blinked. "That's ironic." She gave a sad smile. "Ironic, yeah, but still true." We talked for another hour, about everything except the obvious. When she finally left, I thanked her in a way that felt strange in my mouth. Because thanking someone for being decent feels unnatural when you've been living in a world where basic decency became a rare event. Later that night, I pulled up the file I had started writing. Not the journal, but the letter. I didn't intend to send it, but I kept adding to it anyway. It had started as a release, but it was beginning to turn into something else. A documentation of me. Not who she said I was. Not the version of me she performed for in her voice notes. But the version of me I'd forgotten. The one who had once had boundaries, who had hobbies that didn't revolve around pleasing someone else, who used to write songs and wanted to learn guitar and had opinions without checking how she'd react first. It was around 1 a.m. when the idea hit me. A stupid, reckless, almost vindictive idea. But I needed it. I needed one last thing that wasn't passive. That wasn't me folding in on myself again. I logged into the wedding planning app we'd both used. It had this collaborative space where we shared checklists, budgets, seating charts, and most importantly, contact info for every single person we'd invited. Dozens of people. Old college friends. Her coworkers. My aunts. Her former dance teacher. Everyone. I opened a new email draft. The subject line, "Why there won't be a wedding." It took me 4 hours to write it. Not because I was unsure, but because every word needed to be exactly what I felt without crossing a line I couldn't come back from. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't revenge porn. It was a clear, honest letter detailing how I had discovered the truth, without naming Ezra, without playing the victim, without calling Coralie names. Just facts. The voice memo, the flash drive, the recordings, the betrayal. I even thanked those who had supported us and apologized to the ones who had spent time and money preparing for a celebration that wouldn't happen. At the end of the email, I wrote one final paragraph. Some of you may hear a different version of this story later. You're free to believe what you want. But I wanted at least one version of the truth out in the world, because for the past year, I've been living in someone else's narrative. I'm reclaiming my voice. And I hope you all find people who speak about you with love, not just when you're listening, but always. I didn't send it yet, but it sat there, waiting. I slept for 3 hours that night. Woke up to 2 texts from a number I didn't recognize. One was just a question mark. The other said, "Yes, I should have known you'd run. You were always better at disappearing than fixing things." I didn't have to ask who it was. Coralie had finally moved from apologetic to angry, but her anger didn't hurt anymore. It didn't land. It just floated there, empty, because I was no longer playing my part in her script. Later that morning, I drove back to our apartment. Not to move back in, but to get the last of my things. I had timed it early enough that she wouldn't be there. I still had my key. My hands trembled when it clicked in the lock. The smell hit me first, that familiar mix of her perfume and the citrus candles she always burned. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a trap I had barely escaped. I packed fast. Didn't linger. Until I saw it. On the dresser, in plain sight. The necklace I'd bought her last spring, the one she cried over and said she'd never take off. She tucked it into a glass bowl, beside a pair of earrings and some spare change, like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. But then I noticed something underneath it, a folded piece of paper. My name on it. I hesitated. My chest tightened. Against all logic, I opened it. It read, "Milo, if you're reading this, I'm sorry it ended this way. You were good to me. Too good. I just couldn't breathe anymore. I needed something different, and I didn't know how to tell you that without destroying you. Maybe I still have. I hope one day you understand. Or at least forgive me for not being who you thought I was." See, I stood there, holding the letter, and all I felt was relief. Because finally, she had said it, not with spin, not with half-truths, but plain and clear. She wasn't who I thought she was, and I didn't need to chase that ghost anymore. I didn't take the letter with me. I left it right where I found it, beside the necklace and the shallow remains of whatever meaning either of them once carried. Taking it would have meant it still had power, and it didn't. Not anymore. I walked out of the apartment with the last box of my things, books, my old college hoodie, a few notebooks I hadn't opened in months, and I didn't look back. Not even once. The door clicked shut behind me, and with that small sound, something larger broke loose inside my chest. Not pain this time. Not regret. Just finality. The kind that comes when you realize the worst has already happened, and now all that's left is you, raw, fractured, but still standing. I drove back to the storage unit and sat in my car for a long time. The sun was low in the sky, dipping behind a row of trees that lined the edge of the highway. It painted everything in a golden hue that felt like a lie, too warm, too beautiful for the ruins I'd been dragging behind me all week. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Coralie. It was Ezra. I didn't know how he got my number. Probably from her. I shouldn't have opened the message. But I did. "Ezra, I didn't know she was engaged. If it means anything, I ended things the second I found out. I'm not trying to cause more damage. Just wanted to say that." I stared at the message, unsure of how to feel. Anger? Indifference? Vindication? But what hit me hardest was the quiet irony of it all. He had shown more honesty in a single message than Coralie had in a year of shared life. I didn't reply. Not because I hated him, but because I didn't want to give this story any more chapters than it already had. Instead, I opened my laptop again and reread the unsent email, the one to our wedding guest list. It felt different now. Cleaner. Less about exposing her and more about reclaiming myself. About drawing a line between the man I had been, the one who smiled through silent betrayals, who accepted less and called it love, and the man I needed to become. I clicked send. Just like that, the email was gone. Dozens of people would read it, and maybe some would judge, maybe others would reach out, but I didn't care. It wasn't about their reaction. It was about mine. 2 hours later, I got the first reply. It was from Coralie's Aunt Liza, the woman who had once drunkenly told me at Christmas that I brought out the best in Coralie. Her message simply read, "Milo, I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve this. Thank you for telling the truth." Then more followed. Some shocked, some supportive, A few that felt like subtle jabs disguised as balanced perspective. But none of them mattered as much as the one from my older brother, Ellis. He and I had grown distant the last couple of years. He always said Coralie reminded him of someone he used to regret. I'd taken it as bitterness. Now I saw it as clairvoyance. His message said, "You finally saw her, didn't you? I'm proud of you, Milo. Not for walking away, for waking up. That's harder." I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and stepped outside the unit for the first time in what felt like days. The sky had darkened into that early blue twilight, the kind that makes everything look softer than it really is. I walked across the gravel lot and kept going, past the edge of the property, past the rusted fence. I didn't have a destination. I just walked. For the first time in a week, I noticed the sound of my footsteps. It was strange how foreign the world had become when I wasn't living through the filter of her. Every smell, every breeze, every distant bark or rumble of a passing truck felt like it belonged to a different timeline, one that I hadn't yet claimed. I ended up at a small lake about 15 minutes away, the kind of place couples probably take engagement photos. That thought made me laugh, not bitterly, just absurdly. I sat on a bench overlooking the water, the box of my belongings resting beside me like a silent witness. That's when I noticed something odd. A notification had popped up on my phone, a shared calendar reminder. Engagement photos, 6 p.m., Dahlia Park. I stared at it. That was today. She hadn't removed me from the calendar yet. Out of curiosity, I opened the app. The appointment was still active, and it was synced to her phone too. And that's when something clicked. I knew her. I knew how her mind worked. If there was still a glimmer of hope in her, she'd show up. Not because she believed I'd be there, but because someone would. A photographer, maybe. A witness. An audience. Coralie never walked away from a scene she could still spin. And in that moment, I made a decision. Not one born of vengeance, or drama, or pain, but clarity. I was going to go to that park. Not to confront her. Not to fall apart. But to finally, once and for all, see her exactly as she was, without the script, without the makeup, without the veil I'd been holding in place for 3 years. And then I was going to say goodbye. But not with silence this time. Not by disappearing. With words. The drive to Dahlia Park was quiet. Not the haunting, soul-choking silence I've been living in all week, but a clearer kind, like the final pause between exhale and peace. I didn't play music. Didn't check my phone. I just let the late evening wind filter through the open window as if it were cleansing me of every word, every lie, every moment I had folded myself smaller just to make her feel bigger. When I pulled into the gravel lot, the sun was already sinking low, casting long shadows over the open field. The park was mostly empty, just a few joggers and dog walkers dotting the distance. I recognized the small arbor near the hilltop, the spot we'd marked for our golden hour engagement photos. It looked exactly as I remembered it. Except now, it didn't look like the start of something sacred. It looked like a stage that had finally gone dark. And sure enough, she was there. Coralie stood by the arbor in a long ivory dress, one I didn't recognize. Her hair curled the way she used to wear it for big moments. Makeup carefully done, but not overdone. She looked beautiful, but I didn't feel anything sharp when I saw her. No ache. No pull. Just distance. Like I was observing someone I used to dream about, but couldn't remember why. She hadn't seen me yet. She was fiddling with her phone, pacing in small circles, occasionally glancing toward the road as if she wasn't sure if she wanted to be seen or not. I stepped out of the car and walked slowly toward her. When she saw me, her expression shifted, first surprise, then hesitation, then something resembling hope. "Milo," she said, voice catching. I stopped a few feet away, gave her a calm, unreadable look. "You came," she added, almost like a question. I did. Silence stretched for a beat too long. "I thought maybe we could talk," she said, stepping forward. "I know things got messy." "Messy," I repeated, letting the word hang. That's an interesting word for what happened. She looked down. I deserve that. I nodded once, slowly. "Yeah, you did." More silence. But it wasn't cruel. It was filled with truth neither of us could escape anymore. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, softly. "But I need you to know. I didn't plan for things to fall apart. I was scared. I didn't know how to handle everything. I made selfish choices." That was the closest I'd ever get to an apology from her. And somehow it was enough. "I know," I said. "You were scared. I was too. But the difference is, I stayed. I loved you with my whole heart. You loved me when it was easy." Tears formed in her eyes. Not the kind she used when manipulating people. These were different. But I didn't move to comfort her. That wasn't my job anymore. She swallowed. So what now? I looked around the park, at the warm sky, the breeze rustling the leaves, the spot we once thought would be the start of forever. I think now, I let you go. She blinked. Just like that. Not just like that. It took me a long time to get here. But yes, this is where it ends for me. Not in bitterness. Not in rage. Just freedom. She looked down again, shoulders folding inward. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. I smiled genuinely. No, I just finally stopped letting someone else define my worth. I turned then, before she could say more, and walked away. And with every step I took, I felt lighter. No dramatic tears. No music swelling in the background. Just the steady, peaceful rhythm of shoes on gravel, one foot in front of the other, leaving behind the version of me who accepted less than he deserved. That night, I didn't go back to the storage unit. I checked into a small guest house on the edge of town, one with a window that opened wide and smelled like pine. I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I opened my laptop and deleted the audio files. All of them. Not out of denial, but because I didn't need reminders anymore. I had the lesson. I didn't need the scars to prove it. And then, for the first time in a long time, I started writing again. Not letters, not pain journals. Just writing. A story. Fiction. A world that I controlled, where people said what they meant and love was honest, even if flawed. Weeks passed. I found a small apartment in a quieter part of the city. Took a part-time job teaching creative writing at a community center. Reconnected with my brother. Laughed again, really laughed. Not the polite kind. The kind that lives in your chest and shakes you from the inside. I wasn't fixed, but I was free. And sometimes, that's even better.